again, this audio, I'm going to get some Kingsfield going in the background. So we have a little thing. So, with the series completed, man, that's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, this came out in 2002, so it's been 21 years. 21 years according to this. I think it came out a little bit earlier in Japan, but we'll go off the North American. It says 2002 on the screen. So 21 years it's been since the last Kingsfield game. Full Kingsfield game. There's the additionals, like I said, I think they were on PSP, but only in Japan. But anywho, so I'm going to move into kind of my thoughts on the series. Let me go ahead and shut off the game real quick. Give me just a second. So, the Kingsfield series, if I can plug my headset back in. Of course I can. There we go. I will get through this. All right. Kingsfield series. I feel like this kind of game could still be made today. I think this kind of like limited but exploration based dungeon crawl is not something that's done like this in general anymore. Like the evolution of these kinds of things kind of went towards the Elder Scrolls, right? So Elder Scrolls had a similar kind of thing. The PC, like if you play Arena and Dragonfall, or not Dragonfall, Daggerfall, they have Dragonfall is Shadowrun, but Daggerfall, they have kind of this first person like look around, find stuff. But once they got to Morrowind, they kind of open the world up, and you can just pick a direction and go. Whereas this one, it is still a very like kind of linear experience. Now there's little areas that you don't have to do to pick up stuff. Like we didn't have to go to the lighthouse. As far as I know, that didn't really do anything. We didn't have to go talk to that guy in the water. You know, there was quite a few little things throughout the series, but in this game too, that were unnecessary but there. You know, like the mural. The mural just keeps track of how many crystals you found, so you can see if you found all the magic, which we did. We found all the magic in the game. I think the set in this game that we just beat, the cool armor set, the in-game armor set, I think this one is like the one I liked the least. Like, don't get me wrong, it was still cool, but I liked the other sets better, I think. We did get item descriptions without any weirdness of needing to be intelligent enough to read them, which I think was a smart addition. We didn't really get a lot of lore bits. It was more like, this pickaxe was created by the Earth folk, so now it has Earth damage, and like that was it. That's all we got, you know. So there wasn't a lot of lore in this one. Like the lore was really big in the first game, kind of telling you what each weapon is and what it does, and kind of that. You get a little bit of lore throughout. The second game, you get little bits, but most of the description you can't even read on some of the items. So because you have to find all the Wiseman fruits, and even with that, we weren't able to read everything, which is kind of weird. But I think this one was the perfect next step for the series, because it still kept all of the formula but kind of changed little bits. Like it was definitely like more of a return to Kingsfield 1 than to kind of follow along Kingsfield 2, but they still all had the same kind of makeup. And as you could tell, there's a lot of this kind of design philosophy that did eventually make its way into Demon Souls and Dark Souls and stuff like that. Like how you engage with enemies, you know, how spells work, and, you know, different levels of spells and finding them, and, you know, all sorts of interesting things there. This one did an interesting thing that the other two didn't, at least that, not that I remember. This one had areas where they would take your magic from you, right? Either they would silence you and you can't use it without using something to fix the silence, or they would drain your mana, right? Which is interesting because that shows that they thought about, okay, people are going to become very reliant, especially if you're using the Clarity Bracelet, which that item description really actually upsets me by the end of the game. I was thinking about that, but we'll talk about that in a second. But like with the Clarity Bracelet, you have all of this, you know, mana to cast and cast and cast all this stuff, and they know you probably are going to become dependent on that. So having an area where you have to like use your consumables, and you know, you could turn them off and then just get your mana back, but they're just going to drain it again, right? Or they're going to silence you, which I thought was very interesting because that's something again that I don't remember happening in the first two. I do like that the armor, the end game armor, was much more obvious. I say that, but then technically in 2, they just give you the armor. You talk to a tree, like a crystalline tree, and it's like, here, have the best armor in the game. So I think 1 made you backtrack to get everything. 2 just handed you the armor set, and 3 it put it in the last bit of the game, so you didn't have to like go all the way back up the tower to get the gloves and go all the way down to get the boots. It was basically like gloves, boots, you know, chest armor, shield, you know, it was just all like right there. So that one, gloves, armor, boots, I'm forgetting something, helmet. Yeah, it was all basically in that last bit. You could reach it from the tower, because if you go from the tower, you had that little underwater one, which is where the helmet was. You had the gloves in the graveyard. The boots were up the stairs past where you went to the Howling Winds. The chest was just on the hill on the way to the final boss. And the shield was in the jail. That you go around, you have to, I don't think you have to go that way, but you just go around and it's just there, right? So they made it pretty obvious to find, but you still had to go looking for it, because you can get to the final boss without going through the jail. So you could just miss the shield, because that key was underwater near the skeletons, and we almost missed it, right? So you could have missed that. Moonlight Greatsword being missable, I think, is just a formula of the Kingsfield games. The first game, you don't even get to use the Moonlight Greatsword, right? That's just how the game ends. You defeat Gyra, it shows you the Moonlight Greatsword, and then you fly off into the happy ending, right? That one you have to assemble Darkslayer. That's the Moonlight Sword equivalent. The second game, you have to have gotten that fairy token, which is missable. And that's the only way to get across the bridge to get the Moonlight Greatsword. So it's missable in 2 and it's missable in 3, and you don't get it in 1, which is very interesting, because that means that they had enough confidence in the other pieces of gear in the game that you could potentially be strong enough using something else to be able to beat the game. And that's one thing I did want to talk about too, is these games are actually pretty well balanced. Like, at first, you're like, okay, I have a club, right? In this game, we'll talk about this game and kind of work our way back. It's like, I got a club. This thing is awful versus these plants, right? But if you explore early on in the beginning area, you upgrade to a short sword. Much better for handling stuff, right? And then you get access to the pickaxe, which allows you to start opening barrels and stuff, which that was interesting. I like that later on it was less based on the weight of the weapon and just more, I think, the amount of damage it does per swing. So, because we were just opening boxes with like swords and knives and stuff like that. But it was interesting. You could see the evolution of gear in this game and the other games, where from the club to the Moonlight Greatsword, we had intermediary weapons that kept us at anywhere from around like 2 hits to like 6 hits, right? And in most cases, if we had a weapon of that level that we were supposed to be, we would kill something in as easy as 2 hits and as difficult as 6 hits. And it usually was somewhere in there, right? Which I think is really, really well balanced. The fact that, like, okay, well, you found that cool sword, you jump from 6 hits to 4, or 6 hits to 3, right? So you cut it in half because your exploration paid off, right? Now, when we're talking about this, I have to say there is 2 major gripes I have with Ancient City. One, the item description on the Clarity Bracelet made it sound like it was cursed. So if I had not read about it when I was going back through to catch the PS2 ups, because the PS3 version broke on us, if I had not read that it was just 5 times your magic, like it just multiplied however much magic you have by 5, I would have never used it. But that completely changed the game. Now, you can get through the game without it, it's just you're not going to have 10 casts of something, you're going to have 3, right? Which is how we were kind of going in our first playthrough before it broke. So that really was a kind of like, that's messed up. Because I know a number of players that probably look at the go, oh, it takes my mind power? No thanks, and they sell it, right? Because it's worth like 37,000 gold. Early on, that's a lot of money. In fact, even later on, that's a lot of money, right? That's unlimited herbs. That's, unlimited healing herbal liquids, right? So that really ticked me off. And the other thing that none of the other Kingsfields did, the other 2 Kingsfield did, that this game did that really, really ticked me off, was the invisible sword. One of the most powerful swords that you get near like the last third of the game, Wave Crasher, is invisible. The only way you know about it is if you equipped the broken katana or get it repaired and then equipped it. And we read the description. It does not mention another sword. Right? So unless you get the broken katana, go get it repaired, equipped it, and then go do the water temple, that is the only way you will know that that other sword even exists. Because it is invisible, but it makes noise. Now, of course, I guess you could spam X on the ground, but you'd have to know it exists, right? You'd have to know that that sword is there in order to know to look in the water for something invisible, right? That was a bad design choice. Did you talk to the talking log stalker? I don't know what that is in Kingsfield 3. Was he supposed to, or were they supposed to give us information about the hidden sword? Because so far as I found, like, I thought we talked to everybody, but okay. Someone in chat is saying that there might have been someone to tell it, but it's the fact of like, the walking tree people are walking tree people. I don't remember the walking tree people. But anyways, I didn't like this invisible sword. I think that was Kingsfield 3, not 4. Oh, you're going off the Japanese numbers. Sorry. When you said 3, I was thinking, because we've only played the 3 North American ones because we can't play the first Japanese one. But still, invisible sword, don't think that was a good design choice. I would have liked that when you you repaired the sword, either in its description or at the repair person, it'd be like, hey, by the way, this sword has a twin. You should be able to find it, in the waves or something like that. Just some sort of hint to know to do that. I think that's the 2 things that I did not like: the Clarity Bracelet seeming like it was cursed, and the hidden sword in Ancient City. I'm trying to think. I think the final boss fight was a little anticlimactic, if I'm honest, with Ancient City. Like the person before that with the flying and all the archers and stuff, that was kind of a cool fight, but the second one's not even really a fight. It's just infinitely spawning creatures that you just run around, smack the boss 3 times, end of the game, right? I think that was the most lackluster final boss, because in Kingsfield 2, North American 2. I'm just going to reference the North American numbers, by the way. If you get confused, just remember the North American 1, 2, and 3. Those are the only ones we played. But in 2, you fight the king. He gives you the other Sword of Legend, which was the one from the the one you used to beat the boss in the first game. Anyways, he gives you that sword, and that fight it's okay. Like, it's not super intense. We kind of just like moved around him and smacked him a little bit, but and then right after that, you can go back and save, which is what we did. Right after that, you fight Seath, who is also very interesting with the movesets and stuff. They actually feel like boss fights. Now, they weren't too difficult. I won't say that any of the bosses in Kingsfield were difficult if you were equipped and ready for them, but they could be if you hadn't like found the cool armor, got the cool sword, stuff like that. They could definitely be a lot harder. Like, a perfect example is when we were doing Kingsfield 1. We went after Gyra without going back to get the best sword and the best armor, and we got destroyed consistently. I think we did like maybe 10 tries or something like that, and we just couldn't do it. Maybe it was less than that, but we did a significant amount of tries, and it just wasn't good. So we went back. We got all the Seath armor, or the Ruinous armor. They kind of mixed the names up. Some of it was Seath armor, some of it was Ruinous armor. Not sure why that is. Then we went in there and just completely kicked Gyra's butt. So that's where we kind of learned. Sorry, I'm trying to adjust a thing on my screen, and it's kind of hard to do. There we go. I was moving chat over here so that I could see chat easier. But once we had that stuff, we defeated the boss, no problem, no questions asked. And that's where we learned Kingsfield is like, you have to get that stuff, right? You have to explore, you have to find the good stuff. Thankfully, like I said, in Kingsfield 2, you just talk to a tree and it goes, boop, here's the armor. And you're just like, thanks. Good on you. But that's completely missable too, technically, because you can go down into that area, get the fairy medallion, and then leave. Right? You don't have to get the skull. You don't have to put it on the guy in the throne. You don't have to go up there and get the lore from the tree and the armor set and stuff like that. So it's completely missable. In all of the games, all of the best armor is missable, which is interesting. But that's the thing, is these games are incentivizing exploration, right? They want you to be constantly looking at stuff, finding stuff, interacting with people, doing their quests, stuff like that, right? You can't progress Kingsfield 1 without helping an NPC with their quest. You have to get Harvine's flute, which means that you have to help... I don't remember the guy's name. I think it's like, it starts with an F. We'll call him F. You have to help F out, and then you get the flute, and you can progress, right? It's that's how the game's structured, and I think it does it really well. I can honestly say that I don't think there's a lot of games that I've played both retro and modernly. There's not a lot. There's a few, but there's not a lot of games that play and feel like Kingsfield, right? This series started out as kind of like jokingly one of my favorites because it's the one that people overlook for all of the other FromSoft stuff, right? They look at Armored Core, they look at Dark Souls, they look at, stuff like that. But they know about Kingsfield. It's a few games. No one talks about Kingsfield, right? But I think that's the biggest issue, is like, don't overlook these games. I think they're really well designed, like really, really well designed. Like the only issue we had, like with the game running, was because we were using a PS3 to run a PS2 game. Apparently, the emulation thing breaks Ancient City. But other than that, the games ran as expected. The first two games had the problem because they were running on PlayStation 1. They had the problem where the frame rate would jump around, and that would change animations. Now in 2, it seems like they locked the frame rate, because I don't remember there being a lot of fluctuations in frame rate in 2. In 1, it was prevalent. It was just up and down, up and down, up and down. So they learned from the first game, made their adjustments, and made the second. Legend says if you stream Kingsfield, a weird Oni will show up. Yeah, probably. But sorry. Let me I'm gonna grab water real quick. I don't have a lot of water left in my jug, but yeah. So I would say if you can play the Kingsfield games, give them a shot. I really do think this is kind of an experience that you're only going to get from Kingsfield. Now, I will say, I don't think there's any harm in looking up maps or walkthroughs or whatever for this game, given how important exploration is. Like, first, what I was doing is basically I would clear an area. I would do an area until I know that all I have left is the next area, and then I would look at the walkthrough to make sure we didn't miss anything. Now, I did that for 2 reasons. 1, because I didn't want to miss anything, and 2, so that way you guys can watch this playthrough back and be like, oh, that's where that thing is, and that's where that thing is, and you can see it, because these videos will be published here on Twitch, but they will also be on the YouTube, right? So people that are watching this on YouTube, because I think I'm going to separate out this last part. People that are watching on YouTube, you will have this as soon as I'm done with the stream today. Both places will have the entire playthrough probably by the end of today, right? So you can watch Kingsfield 1, you can watch Kingsfield 2, you can watch Ancient City. And I hope you guys enjoyed this playthrough. I really did. I really enjoyed the Kingsfield games. Again, I do think this is kind of a standalone type of game or series. I do think they are worth playing if you can get your hands on them. I will say these games, the physical copies of these games, are very expensive now. I think for this kind of copy of Kingsfield 1, this is like $300 or something, $300 to $400, because it's a complete copy, right? You have the case, you've got the manual, and you've got the disc, right? So this is kind of expensive. I don't remember how much 2 costs. This is the one I've actually had since childhood, since 2000, which I was some age in. So I have actually had this for a while. This one I didn't have to purchase, and this one I think was relatively cheap, but still within like $50 to $100, so almost the cost of a new game. But the cost of retro games are kind of weird, and again, that's a complete with the book. So those games can be kind of expensive. I don't think there's anything wrong with emulating them. Just know that you're probably going to have to look up some fixes if you try to emulate Ancient City. All Kingsfield games are $100+ now. Wow. Okay. But if you emulate this game, apparently there's issues. Obviously, with the PS3, it's unfixable. But apparently with emulator, you might be able to fix stuff. Because when I was looking for fixes for the PS3 version, a lot of the emulate PlayStation stuff was saying, hey, this is how you kind of fix this problem. So it looks like if you emulate this one, you might be able to fix it, as long as you're not using a PS3. I do recommend, if you do have this one, play it on PS2 if you have a PS2, obviously. So that way you don't have to worry about that. final thoughts on the series. Is still, it went from jokingly one of my favorite series to seriously one of my favorite series. I enjoyed every minute of it. I would say the only time that I got frustrated was with the Colosseum in the first game, because that was a gauntlet. It was meant to be a gauntlet, and it was not easy. But we learned kind of how to interact with the game. We beat the Colosseum, and we were good to go. But I really enjoyed the series. I really enjoyed the playthrough. I'm kind of sad that it's over. I will figure out what we're going to do next. There's technically one Kingsfield-like that I have called Eternal Ring, not to be confused with Elden Ring. It's called Eternal Ring, and it's supposed to play like Kingsfield, but it's not set in that universe. I'll have to do a little bit more research. Like I said, I already have a copy of it. I found it at a retro game store for like $15 or something like that. It's not as big a name, obviously, as Kingsfield, or I guess as hard to find. But we do have that one. Actually, let me grab it. All right, this is what I'm talking about. It's called Eternal Ring, done by H-Tech and From Software. You can see it right there. I need to get this gunk off the back of it, but you can kind of see. I don't know. I'll try to get as close as I can. You can kind of see it's very much still in the Kingsfield first-person stamina, mana. In fact, the bars look kind of similar. Yeah. So we might play this one next, or we might take a little bit of a break from some retro games and play more of a modern game. We'll see. But again, final thoughts: play the series if you can. If you can't, definitely watch playthroughs. It's very interesting. It was very fun. I love it. For me to play 3 games and my only 2 gripes is that a couple items were weird, I think that's really solid. I do have a little gripe that the final boss of Ancient City was not really a boss. It was hit, fall, run back, hit, fall, run back, hit, dead. Like, that was it. That was the final boss, right? So that was a little anticlimactic, but again, 3 minor complaints for an entire series, something that took us, I think, over 60 hours, maybe close to 70 or 80 hours to complete. That's solid. That's solid. So I hope you enjoyed this.